The girl behind the counter. The rain tapped gently on the diner's wide windows, blurring the city lights outside into glowing streaks of gold and blue. Inside, the hum of quiet conversation mixed with the soft clinking of silverware and coffee cups. Tucked behind the counter, wearing a faded red apron and a tired smile, stood a young woman named Emma. Emma was used to people staring, not because of her smile, her eyes, or her kindness, but because of the long, pale scar that ran from her left cheekbone down to the edge of her jawline. It was the kind of mark that made people whisper. Kids stared. Adults turned their heads, politely, but looked again when they thought she wasn't watching. She'd had the scar since she was 11, the result of a car accident that had changed her life and taken her mother away in the same night. She was 27 now, working, double shifts to pay for her younger brother's school in their tiny apartment. Every day she served smiles along with scrambled eggs and pretended not to notice the discomfort in people's eyes. Most customers just ate and left. Some, though, weren't so quiet. You know, a man muttered one afternoon, just loud enough to be heard. You'd be pretty if it weren't for that thing on your face. His friends chuckled. Emma didn't flinch. She had learned not to. She poured his coffee, nodded, and walked away, carrying the sting of the comment like she carried trays. Heavy, but with balance. That same day, just as she was wiping down the counter and preparing to close for the night, the diner's door opened. The bell chimed. A gust of cold air slipped in, and with it, a man stepped through. Tall, quiet, dressed in a black jacket, jeans, and boots still dusted from the wet streets. His eyes were kind, worn, familiar. Emma looked up, and something about the man struck her. She blinked once, twice. She wasn't sure if the exhaustion was playing tricks on her. He walked over to the counter, smiled softly, and said, "Hey, you guys still open?" She nodded. "Kitchen's closing soon, but coffee's still hot." He slid onto a stool, brushing the rain from his sleeves. "Coffee's all I need, long night." Emma poured the coffee. As she placed the cup in front of him, she noticed something in his expression, a calm awareness. He looked at her, not through her, not past the scar, but into her eyes, as if trying to read something behind them. "Rough day?" he asked. Voice gentle, she shrugged. "Just the usual." "That kind of usual isn't fair," he said. She gave a short laugh. "You sound like someone who's seen a few unfair things." "I have," he replied. "But I've also seen people who rise above it." She paused. "What's your name?" He smiled, not with pride, but with peace. "Keanu." She raised an eyebrow. "Like the actor?" "Exactly like him." Emma tilted her head. "You look like him too. I get that sometimes." They both laughed softly. And in that moment, in that quiet diner with the rain still falling outside, something shifted. The man who had been watching from a booth earlier, the same one who'd made the cruel comment, suddenly looked uncomfortable. He stood, dropped a tip that didn't match his bill, and hurried out. Keanu noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he sipped his coffee and asked, "Do you mind if I stay a while?" Emma shrugged. "Suit yourself. I've got dishes to finish." As she turned, she felt something strange, a lightness in her chest. She wasn't used to kindness from strangers, especially not from ones who seemed to see her, all of her, not just the mark on her skin. And so began a night that would change everything. Strangers with gentle eyes, the diner was quiet again. It always was this time of night. The clock, above the coffee machine, ticked past 11 as Emma scrubbed the last of the dishes. Outside, the rain had softened into a steady whisper, coating the streets in a glossy shimmer. The neon sign that buzzed outside the window reflected in the puddles, flashing open in soft red and blue hues. Keanu still sat at the counter, his hands wrapped around the now half-empty mug. He hadn't said much after introducing himself. He didn't need to. Some people had the kind of silence that felt heavy, awkward, but not him. His silence felt thoughtful, kind, like he wasn't trying to fill space with noise, but with presence. Emma glanced over her shoulder at him. You waiting on someone? She asked, her voice half curious, half cautious. Keanu shook his head slowly. Just resting. Long day. I needed somewhere quiet. She nodded, drying her hands on a towel. Well, you picked the right place. After 10, this place turns into a library with pancakes. He chuckled. I've been in noisier libraries. They shared a smile. It was soft, unforced, like two people who weren't trying to impress each other but were simply human together. Emma leaned against the counter for a moment. So, Keanu, what brings you here? I mean, not just the diner. This part of town's not exactly tourist central. He sipped his coffee, then said, looking for something. Or maybe someone. Haven't decided which yet. She tilted her head. That sounds cryptic, not meaning to be, just sometimes you go where life nudges you, even if you're not sure why yet. Emma's eyes softened. There was something about the way he spoke, like he carried stories behind every word. Stories he wasn't forcing on anyone but wouldn't hide if asked. Before she could respond, the door jingled again. This time it wasn't a kind stranger. 3 young men entered, laughing loudly. Their jackets were soaked, boots tracking in water and mud. One of them, the tallest, had sharp eyes and a cocky grin. They looked like they were coming from a bar, maybe more than one. Emma straightened, her muscles tensing. She knew these types. They weren't dangerous usually, but loud, disrespectful, the kind that saw service staff as something beneath them. The tall one walked straight to the counter, leaning on it too hard. Hey, sweetheart, he slurred slightly. You still serving food or just attitude? Emma forced a smile. Kitchen's closed, but we've got coffee and pie. The second one smirked. You got anything sweet that ain't pie? Keanu's chair creaked as he stood slowly. Emma's eyes flicked to him. Don't, she thought. Please don't get involved. But Keanu didn't raise his voice, didn't flex his presence. He simply stepped beside the counter, placing himself gently between her and the men. Guys, he said calmly. She's just doing her job. Maybe ease up a little. The tallest one scoffed. Whoa, what's this? The hero act? Keanu's voice stayed steady. No act, just decency. The third guy laughed. Wait, isn't that Keanu Reeves? The tall one looked closer. His eyebrows lifted. Oh, no way. Matrix guy? Emma swallowed. She hated this part, when people recognized him, or thought they did. When the shift moved from conversation to spectacle. But Keanu didn't flinch. Just a guy trying to enjoy some coffee. The energy in the room twisted. The men weren't aggressive, not really. But they hovered in that uncomfortable space where one wrong word could tip everything sideways. Then the tall one leaned closer to Emma. Too close. So what happened to your face anyway? He asked, as if it were casual, as if it were funny. Cat scratch? Or you just lose a fight with ugly? Silence. The diner stopped breathing. Emma froze. The words hit like a slap. She'd heard worse, but never like this. Never with eyes staring and mouths laughing. And then, it happened so fast she almost didn't believe it. Keanu reached forward, not with anger, not with violence, but with a calm, deliberate grace. He took the man's arm and moved it gently off the counter, creating distance. His voice didn't rise. Apologize, he said. Not a command, not a threat, just a request. But there was steel behind it. The tall man blinked. The smirk faded. Something, in Keanu's gaze, not rage but deep disappointment, made the guy look down. Then, awkwardly, he mumbled, Yeah, all right, sorry. Keanu didn't move until the 3 of them turned and left, the bell jingling behind them. The rain swallowed them outside. Emma didn't realize she was shaking until she gripped the counter. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to cry. Not again. Not in front of him. Keanu sat back down, sipping his coffee like nothing happened. She stared at him. Why did you do that? He looked at her, his eyes gentle. Because No one should have to fight alone. Those words, simple, true, broke something open in her chest. For years, Emma had taught herself to be strong, to ignore it, to swallow the hurt. But this was different. Someone had stood up, not out of pity, not to be a hero, but because it was right. And for the first time in a very long time, Emma felt seen, not as the girl with the scar, but as someone worth protecting, someone worth respect, someone human. The scar we do not see the next morning. Emma woke up earlier than usual, the sounds of the city still muffled behind the fogged windows of her apartment. Her brother, Sam, was asleep in the next room, his textbooks spread across the desk like scattered wings. He'd stayed up late studying again. Emma smiled softly at the thought of him, 16, determined, brilliant in ways he didn't fully understand yet. He was the reason she worked so hard, the reason she kept showing up to the diner even on days when her soul felt like it was breaking. But today, something felt different. She sat at the edge of her bed for a long time, the image of Keanu Reeves standing at the counter still vivid in her mind. Not just how he'd spoken, but how he'd listened, how he had turned a moment of cruelty into something safe, something healing. She wasn't used to that. Not from strangers, not from anyone. As she made her way to work, the rain had stopped, leaving behind the scent of wet asphalt and the glisten of puddles on the sidewalks. The city seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. When she pushed open the diner door, she half expected everything to go back to normal. The clatter, the customers, the same old small talk. But there, sitting in the same booth as the night before, was Keanu. He looked up, smiled softly, and nodded. As if he'd been waiting. As if coming back wasn't an accident. Emma blinked. "You again?" "Me again," he said. "Hope that's all right." "Well," she smirked, tying on her apron, "as long as you're tipping better than last night's clowns, you're welcome." He chuckled. "I'll take that as permission to stay." The morning passed slowly. Keanu remained at the booth, reading from a worn paperback he kept in his coat pocket, sipping coffee, watching the world outside the window. He didn't draw attention, didn't ask questions. He just existed. And somehow, in that quiet presence, Emma felt something inside her begin to thaw, something long buried. After the rush, when the diner was half empty again, she brought him a slice of blueberry pie, still warm. "On the house," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "I didn't order this." "You didn't have to," she replied. "I figured you earned it." He took a bite, then looked up at her with a kind of surprised joy. "This is really good." "Secret family recipe," she said. "Well, not so secret now." He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Can I ask you something personal?" Emma braced herself. Here it comes, she thought. The question about the scar. They always asked eventually. But Keanu didn't point, didn't even glance toward it. "How did you learn to carry so much and still smile?" The question caught her off guard. It wasn't about the scar. It was about something deeper, something invisible. She sat down across from him, folding her, hands together. "I guess I'm because I had to. After the accident, I didn't have a choice. My dad left. Mom was gone. Sam was just a little kid. If I broke down, who would be there for him?" Keanu nodded, understanding in his eyes. But smiling, she continued, "That part? I don't know. Maybe it's my way of holding things together. If I don't smile, I might fall apart. And if I fall apart, what happens to him?" Keanu leaned back. "You're stronger than you think." Emma looked down at her hands. "People don't usually say that. They just see the scar." "That's because most people are looking at the wrong thing," he said. "They see what's on the surface and miss what's underneath." She swallowed. "And what do you see?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her, with the kind of gaze that held no pity, no judgment, only truth. I see someone who survived, he said. Someone who didn't let pain turn her bitter. Someone who wakes up every day and chooses kindness, even when the world doesn't deserve it. Emma didn't know what to say. Her chest tightened. Not with pain, but with something else. A kind of release. Like someone had finally said the thing she'd been waiting to hear all her life. The bell over the door rang again, breaking the moment. A woman in her 60s entered, her clothes soaked from a sudden sprinkle outside. She looked flustered, searching for her wallet as she approached the counter. "Take your time," Emma said gently, already pouring a fresh cup of coffee. "Thank you, dear," the woman sighed. "My car broke down a few blocks away. Today's just one of those days." Emma smiled. "You're safe here. Sit as long as you need." Keanu watched the exchange with quiet admiration. When the woman sat down near the window, he leaned in, slightly. "You do that often?" "Do what?" "Make people feel like they matter." Emma shrugged. "Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" He smiled again, like she'd said something rare and sacred. That evening, when her shift ended, Emma found Keanu still at the booth, watching the sky turn amber through the rain-speckled glass. "You waiting on the stars now?" she asked. "Maybe," he said, standing up. "Or maybe I was waiting for you to finish work so I could walk you home." She blinked. "You want to walk me home?" He nodded. "Only if it's okay. Only if you want the company." There was a long silence. Then she nodded. "I'd like that." They walked side by side through the soft evening air, past puddles and streetlights, past stray cats and closed shops. For the first time in years, Emma didn't feel the need to hide her face behind her hair. She didn't flinch when people passed by. She didn't feel ashamed, because beside her walked someone who made her feel whole. Not fixed, not pitied, but enough. And in that slow, quiet walk through the city streets, under a sky slowly clearing of rain, something invisible and powerful passed. Between them, not love, not yet, but something just as rare, recognition. The whisper behind the smile, the days that followed blurred into something beautiful and unfamiliar. Keanu returned to the diner each morning like clockwork, slipping into the same booth with the same quiet ease, always bringing a book, always ordering coffee. Sometimes he stayed for an hour, sometimes more. He never demanded her time, but he never ignored her either. He noticed the little things, when she looked tired, when her limp returned after long shifts, when her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. And when he noticed, he didn't say anything loud or dramatic. Instead, he'd slide her a cup of coffee when no one was looking. He'd stack the chairs in the corner when the last customer left. Once, when she cut her hand on a broken dish, he didn't ask if she was okay. He simply wrapped a clean napkin around it, held her hand for a moment, and said, "Don't pretend it doesn't hurt. It's okay to feel it." No one had ever said that to her before. Not in a way that felt safe. Emma's scar was no longer the most noticeable thing about her, at least not to him. And slowly, unbelievably, it began to fade in her own mind too. Not the mark itself, but the weight of it. The shame, the memories attached to it. It was like seeing it through a different mirror. One that didn't judge. But nothing in life stays peaceful for long. On a Tuesday afternoon, just before the dinner rush, a man in a black leather jacket stepped into the diner. He had hard eyes, the kind that didn't blink enough, and a phone glued to his ear. He barely looked around as he walked straight to the counter. Emma recognized him immediately. His name was Vince Carraway. He owned 3 buildings on their block, including the one that housed the diner. He wasn't cruel, not exactly, but he was cold, calculating. He cared about rent, not people, and he never smiled unless there was profit in it. "Miss Hayes," he said, snapping his phone shut. "We need to talk." Emma's stomach twisted. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carraway. Is everything all right?" "Not exactly. I'm increasing the rent next month. 20%. Emma blinked. "What? But you already raised it 6 months ago and we're barely keeping up as it is." He shrugged. "Cost of business, inflation, you know how it is." "This will crush us," she said quietly. We're not a chain. We don't have backup funding. We're just a small family-run place. Then maybe it's time to sell, Vince said, turning toward the door again. I've got offers lined up. Someone wants to turn the lot into a boutique. Hotel, your spot is prime real estate. And just like that, he was gone. The bell jingled. The door swung closed behind him and the air inside the diner felt tighter. Heavier. Emma stood frozen behind the counter, one hand resting on the cash register, the other clenched at her side. Keanu had watched the entire exchange, from his booth. He rose slowly, walked over and leaned on the counter, not saying anything at first. Just being there. How bad is it? He asked softly. Bad, she said. We can't afford that kind of jump, and if we shut down, she hesitated. This place isn't just my job. It's my anchor. It's how I keep Sam in school. It's how I pay the hospital bills from the accident. If this goes, I don't know what we'll do. Keanu's eyes narrowed in quiet thought. There's always a way forward. We just have to find it. Emma shook her head. You don't get it. I've been holding everything together with tape and prayer. One wrong move and the whole thing collapses. Studied her, the weight of her words hanging between them. Then, as gently as ever, he said, Then let me help. She looked up. Why? His answer came without hesitation. Because no one helped me when I needed it. Because I know what it feels like to stand on a crumbling ledge and not see a way down. And because, Emma, you've helped more people than you realize. It's time someone stood for you. His voice was calm, but the emotion beneath it pulsed like a second heartbeat. Emma wanted to say no, to protect him from the chaos of her life. But part of her, the part that remembered how he had shielded her from cruelty, how he saw her pain without fear, whispered that maybe this time, she didn't have to carry it alone. What are you thinking? She asked. Keanu hesitated, then pulled out his phone. I have a few contacts, people who owe me favors. I've worked with foundations, community grants. Maybe we can rally the neighborhood. If people knew the diner was in trouble, they might step up. Emma stared at him. You're serious? Completely. And in that moment, something shifted. The problem didn't vanish. The weight didn't disappear. But the load felt lighter. Not because it was smaller, but because she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Later that night, Emma sat on the diner rooftop with Keanu. They shared takeout noodles in paper boxes, the city stretching out in glittering silence around them. Sam had joined them earlier but had gone back inside to finish his homework. The sky above was thick with stars, rare and quiet. Emma leaned back, eyes closed, listening to the hum of the street below. You ever wish life had a reset button? She asked. Keanu nodded slowly. Every day, but then I remember. Even if we can't start over, we can still start again. She turned to him. What do you mean? You're not the same person you were before the accident. That scar, those struggles, they didn't ruin you. They reshaped you, made you sharper, softer, braver. Emma didn't speak. Her throat tightened. Keanu continued, his voice almost a whisper. Sometimes we think our brokenness makes us less, but the truth is it makes us real. It makes us human. They sat in silence, not needing to say more. The wind picked up, brushing strands of hair across Emma's cheek. Keanu reached out and tucked them behind her ear, his fingers light, respectful. She didn't pull away. You've changed my life, she said softly. I think, he replied, you've just remembered how bright you are. And somewhere in that quiet rooftop moment, surrounded by stars and scarred histories, Emma realized something deeper than she ever had before. He wasn't just walking into her life. He was teaching her how to walk into her own. Voices that rise, shadows that return. 3 days passed, then 4. The news about the rent hike spread slowly, not through headlines or official channels, but through whispers carried on warm plates and steaming cups of coffee. Regulars noticed the tension in Emma's smile, the tired way she wiped tables a little slower, The way Keanu lingered longer after his meals, always helping without being asked. The two of them had become something of a quiet team, unspoken, unofficial, but deeply connected. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something sturdier, something built from truth. Keanu kept his promise. He spent hours making calls, reaching out to people Emma didn't even know existed. Some were old friends from projects he'd supported. A local artist, a foundation board member, a woman who ran a nearby community kitchen. They weren't rich, most of them, but they were real. And real people, when moved by purpose, could move mountains. One afternoon, a local musician who'd once played open mic night at the diner came in and offered to host a fundraiser. "We'll do it right out front," she said. "Guitars, lights, posters, your blueberry pie can be the headliner." Emma laughed for the first time in days. It wasn't a forced laugh. It was round and full, like a sound she'd forgotten how to make. But even as hope grew, a shadow lurked behind it. Emma noticed Keanu becoming quieter each night, not in the peaceful way she had grown used to, but in a withdrawn way, like he was holding something back, something heavy, something he didn't want her to see. She didn't press him, not at first, but she saw it. In the way his hands trembled, slightly when no one was looking, in the way he stared at the street when they sat on the rooftop, as if watching for something that hadn't come yet, in the way he never let his phone out of sight. One night after the diner had closed and the chairs were stacked and the world had softened into silence, Emma found him alone at the counter, staring at a message on his phone. His jaw was tight, his eyes far away. She sat beside him, waited. After a moment, he said, "I wasn't always like this." Emma tilted her head. "Like what?" "Steady," he said. "Calm, grounded. I've worked hard to become the man I am now, but there was a time when I was lost, angry, reckless." She didn't speak. She let the space hold his words. He continued. "There was someone I loved. A long time ago. We were young, naive. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And then she got sick. Really sick. I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to stay, so I ran." Emma looked at him, her chest tightening. "By the time I came back," he whispered, "she was gone." A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, but aching, raw. "I promised myself," he said, "that if I ever got a second chance to do something right, to stay when it mattered, I'd take it." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "Is that what this is? A second chance?" "I don't know," he said, "but I know it feels like something worth staying for." His voice cracked slightly, not much, just enough to reveal the scar beneath the surface. Emma reached out, her fingers resting gently on his. "You don't have to fix me, Keanu." He looked at her, startled. "You don't have to carry my pain to make up for yours," she continued. "Just being here, being real, it means more than you know." He nodded, his eyes wet. The next morning, the fundraiser plans came to life like magic. Volunteers set up folding tables along the sidewalk. A hand-painted sign that read, "Save the soul of our street," was hung above the entrance. Fairy lights were strung from street lamp to street lamp. Someone donated a speaker. Someone else brought old records and a turntable. By the time the sun began to set, the street was glowing, not just with light, but with people. Dozens came, then hundreds. Emma stood behind the pie table, her apron dusted with flour, her cheeks flushed from baking. Her brother Sam passed out flyers. Keanu worked quietly behind the scenes, making sure everyone had what they needed. It wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't glamorous. But it was alive. People who had never looked twice at the diner now clapped, their hands to live music, and shared stories about the best meals they'd ever had. Strangers dropped $20 bills in the donation jar. Old neighbors hugged each other like family. And at the heart of it all was Emma, not hiding, not shrinking, just shining. But not everything was celebration. Vincent Carraway arrived near The end, stepping out of a black sedan with tinted windows. He stood across the street watching with narrowed eyes. The developer he had promised the property to was beside him, tapping a phone, unimpressed. Emma saw them, her breath caught. But before fear could take hold, she felt a hand slip into hers. Keanu. She looked at him. He gave a single nod, and just like that, she turned away from Vincent, turned back toward the people, toward the music, toward the light. She made a choice, to keep standing, to keep fighting. When the night ended and the tables were folded and the jars counted, the total raised wasn't enough to save the diner completely. Not yet. But it was enough to buy time. Enough to keep the lights on for another month. Enough to remind Emma that she wasn't alone. As they cleaned up, Sam ran to her, breathless. Someone left an envelope under the door. It's addressed to you. Inside was a check. No name. No note, just a number. Emma stared at it. Enough to cover 3 months' rent. She turned to Keanu, her voice shaking. Was this you? He shook his head slowly. Not me. She blinked. Then who? He smiled. Maybe someone who remembers what it's like to be seen. Emma held the check to her chest, overwhelmed. For the first time since she was a child, she felt the kind of joy that didn't come with fear attached. The kind of joy that said, "You're not forgotten." And as she locked the diner door that night, standing in the golden glow of the streetlights, she realized something she hadn't dared to believe. Her story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The face in the mirror, a week passed since the fundraiser, and the diner glowed with new energy. It wasn't just the fresh paint on the windows or the vase of sunflowers someone had left on the counter anonymously. It was the way people walked, in with purpose now, with gratitude, like they knew they were part of something bigger. Even the regulars had changed. They smiled longer, tipped better, laughed louder, and they looked at Emma differently, not with pity, not with sympathy, but with respect, with admiration. She hadn't done anything extraordinary in their eyes. She had simply stayed. Through all the cruelty, all the fatigue, all the shadowy weight of life pressing in, she had kept showing up. And sometimes showing up was the most courageous act of all. But even as the days grew brighter, the mystery of the anonymous check lingered like a soft echo in the back of her thoughts. She had asked Keanu 3 more times if it had been him. He denied it each time, gently but firmly. And she believed him, not because his words were convincing, but because he didn't carry the pride of someone who had saved the day. He simply kept doing what he'd done since the beginning, standing beside her, listening, seeing. Then, one quiet evening, as the sun melted over the horizon and the shadows lengthened on the sidewalk, Emma found a small envelope tucked beneath, the sugar jar behind the counter, same paper, same handwriting, her name in careful, even strokes. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No check, no money. Just words. Dear Emma, I saw you once. Not in the diner, not through a window, but in a mirror. I saw you the day I decided to stop hiding from the person I had become. You didn't know me, but I remembered you. Years ago, after the accident, you were in the hallway of the hospital. You were crying, but not loudly. You were holding your brother's hand. Your face was bandaged. You looked like you'd been shattered. And yet, when the nurse asked if you needed anything, you smiled and said, "Just let my brother sleep." I never forgot that. At the time, I was at the worst point in my life. I was spiraling, reckless, selfish, and yet your quiet strength made me pause. It was the first time I wanted to become someone better. I never thanked you, but I think you changed my life. The money isn't a gift, it's a debt, one I've carried silently. And now finally I get to repay it. You reminded me what it means to endure with grace. Thank you, a friend you helped without knowing. Emma stared at the letter for a long time, her fingers trembling. Her eyes welled, but not with grief, with something deeper. A sense of connection that transcended logic or explanation. How many people Had she passed by in her hardest days without realizing the weight of her own light? How many hearts had shifted course because she chose to keep walking? She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her apron pocket, close to her heart. That night, the diner stayed open late. Not because of customers, but because of music. A few friends had brought their guitars again. The neighborhood kids danced between tables. Sam played the piano for the first time in public, a soft, clumsy melody that made people smile. Keanu sat in his usual booth, sipping coffee, a small notebook open beside him. He wrote in it sometimes, never showing anyone what the pages held. But Emma didn't need to see it. She felt the story in every moment he shared. After the last song faded and the lights dimmed, Emma joined him. "You've done a lot for me," she said, "but I want to ask you something selfish." Keanu looked up, smiling. "What's that?" "Don't leave." He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her the way he always did, like he was seeing something sacred. Then he reached out and touched her scar with the back of his fingers. Not to erase it, not to pity it, but to honor it. "Emma," he said quietly, "I've spent years drifting, running, trying to right the wrongs I caused, the people I let down. And somewhere in all that, I forgot how to stay." She waited. He took a breath. "But you reminded me." A pause. "I want to stay," he said. "Not as a guest, not as a shadow. I want to be part of this, part of your story. If you'll let me." Emma nodded slowly. "I'd like that." Outside, the city was quiet. Not the lonely kind of quiet, but the peaceful kind. The kind that settles over you like a warm blanket after a long day. Months later, the diner had a new name: Emma's Table. Underneath the painted sign, in smaller letters, it read, "Everyone belongs." People still came for the food, but they stayed for something else. For the way the staff remembered your name. For the piano in the corner that anyone could play. For the wall where customers left sticky notes of encouragement. And for the woman behind the counter who smiled not because life had been easy, but because she had learned to rise anyway. And sitting in the corner booth, day after day, always with a cup of coffee and a notebook in hand, was a man named Keanu. Not a star, not a savior. Just someone who had found his home in the quiet courage of another. The scar on Emma's face never disappeared, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it became part of the story that made her unforgettable, and, in that story, told not in headlines but in laughter, in kindness, in soft eyes and steady hands, the world quietly, powerfully, changed.